All right, and welcome everyone to the Ginette Biro Podcast. I'm Ginette Biro, and do we ever have an amazing episode for you today? I'm so excited to be here with not only my wonderful friend, business partner, but an amazing human being who is big into mind, body, spirit wellness. And we're not going to be talking as much about spirit, although that always comes in, but we're going to be talking about food and what we eat and why. And so I'm excited to get into that. But just to start us off, welcome to the show, Lois. So nice to have you.
Great. Thanks so much, Ginette. And of course, we love partnering on all of this and being in the mind, body, spirit realm. We love to be able to talk about this and our messages anytime.
Absolutely. And so Lois is Dr. Lois Nahirney, I should say. Lois is the president and CEO of dnaPower. And dnaPower has been something that has really revolutionized my way of eating, my health and wellness as well. And I had many inquiries from many of you guys about what do I eat? How do I eat? How do I follow, what fuels my body in connection to spirit? What does that look like? And I could tell you exactly what I eat, but that's what works for me, for this vessel. And so the root of one of the best ways to figure out what works for you is to know your DNA. And that's essentially what they do at dnaPower is knowing your DNA, how your body interacts. And Lois, you'll talk more about this, but knowing what foods fuel you is what helps you live in the least amount of inflammation, most amount of harmony, and allows you to vibrate at your highest potential. So, Lois, how about you tell us a little bit about your journey of what got you into DNA?
Great. Well, thanks so much, Ginette. And, it's interesting. You and I met because of DNA, because you were on this mind, body, spirit integration journey. And this was one of the pieces that you wanted to integrate into the practice and the work that you were doing, trying to help people be their whole and their best self. Well, that's in part what got me into this. I'm actually a corporate executive by background. And in my 40s, I started to get sick. I was traveling the world. I had adopted identical twins, which actually got me very interested in genetics at an early stage because I had this nature nurture experiment going on in my home every day. But I started, as I was getting sick, I had chronic fatigue. I had extreme periods, which created anemia. I had restless leg syndrome, where your limbs vibrate at night and it's very difficult to sleep. And most troubling, I had breathing problems. I couldn't fill my lungs with air, and it didn't make sense for the health that my body seemed to be in. Little did I know it wasn't healthy at a cellular level, but I looked healthy on the surface. It culminated in me I went to doctors for years and years, specialists, oncologists, asthma specialists, gynecologists, like so many appointments and nothing. I ended up on some drugs for hemophiliacs because of just trying to control the bleeding. There was drugs for restless leg syndrome, and nothing was doing anything. We just couldn't find anything. And it culminated by having no iron in my body, and my organs were shutting down. And I was just a mess. And the doctor sent me straight to emergency. And with my young kids at home with a babysitter and my husband away out of town, I ended up 2 days in hospital on blood transfusions. And that's where you just give your head a shake and you go, okay, I have got to make some changes in my life. This is not working. Something is really up. It was one of those big wake-up calls from spirit to say, I need to find an answer. And yet I've been looking and haven't been able to. I was then at my grandmother's 85th birthday, and I was talking to my cousin, who's a 3-time Canadian bodybuilding champion, Carmen. And she says, oh, you've got to try. There's this amazing new company doing DNA testing, and you need to learn about that for your twins. And I thought, well, that makes sense. So I ended up doing the testing for the twins and myself, learned wonderful stuff about how my twins need to eat to support their bodies. But I unexpectedly found out a lot about my body as well. And two of the most important things I learned is, one, I discovered I've got genetic weaknesses in vitamin Bs, and it affects my cells' ability to be able to absorb and to function and to manage DNA and to take the iron up and to support hormones and many other things. So I had this B problem, and I have some lactose issues. And so I thought, well, I wonder if there's any chance that is at the source, or that has a link to these problems. I had never not been a supplementer. I started taking supplements. And within 2 weeks, suddenly I was back to my old self. And I was just like, it was just like, I couldn't believe it had been that easy to solve all these health issues. And all it took was some supplementation. And I thought, well, I wonder how many other people might be nutrient deficient or have some toxicity issues that they're not aware of. And so I got involved with the company. A bit long story short, I ended up leaving my corporate job, going to run dnaPower, and taking over the company after the investor died the day after I started. So it was like this crazy journey that got me into DNA. So that's kind of the DNA journey. And then since then, it's been phenomenal. I just love that I get to help every day people be healthier by learning about their unique bodies and how to live according to their DNA.
Yeah, what a journey. What a journey. And I love how that was exactly how we met, right? Because we met one day where this was when I was still doing, my front end position was a kinesiologist and presenting on DNA, but the back end was all mediumship, right? And so Lois and I, we met up one day because I had my DNA done, and I was going to be speaking and presenting at the Toronto Fitness Conference. And so we wanted to meet. And I remember when I was driving to meet you that day, I was like, okay, so if she asks me what I do, I'm like, am I going to just stick with the science, or am I going to tell her who I really am? And I was like, I'm going to have to make a decision because this is my one chance to, be upfront. And so I was like, well, we'll see if she even asks, right? And sure enough, we meet the pleasantries, and you're like, would you like some coffee? And I remember I was facing the coffee machine, and you said, so what else do you do in your free time? And I was like, oh gosh, here we go. And my heart started beating, and I was like, well, in addition to kinesiology, I also am a medium. And I was waiting. I remember time slowed. I'm like, now I'll see what her response is. Either she'll be like, oh gosh, this girl, we're not having her present on dnaPower, or she'll be open. And you and I, we spent the first hour of our DNA meeting talking about spirituality.
Oh, I was just, it's wonderful again how the universe delivers. It was like, oh my God, tell me all about this. I want to hear about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny then because that fall, this is now a little bit later, but in the summer fall of 2019, I really wanted to explore spirituality. And so I just started up this group at my house, a spirit evening where we would read some books and some meditation. And my very first guest speaker was Ginette.
Mm-hmm.
She was the medium I knew. So Ginette came in and was my first speaker at this event. And it was so amazing. And then I did another one, and you'd had your NDE then.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had you come in and talk about that. And that actually was the genesis of Avalon Spirit. So we just said this really works. So anyway, so that's a little bit of the story, how we all got connected. Yeah. And then you and I know we found out that we've been partners in past lives as well, that we kind of have this synergy that we bring together. So it's been really exciting just to work together.
Absolutely. It's been a fun ride. But one thing that I really like that we often bring into what we talk about and what we do, like you were saying, or we were talking about before, is the mind, body, spirit wellness, right? Like you can't have full spiritual expansion without a healthy vehicle, a healthy human body to keep you present and available to transcend and grow. Right. And to transcend and grow and change in frequency. And again, that means we start vibrating faster and higher in our physical bodies. We need the right nutrients and the right food to fuel that body.
Absolutely. So we are our core is our DNA strand, and we may have more DNA strands than we know of with other work that you've looked at, but on our core human 3D DNA strand, we are born with our DNA. It stays with us for our lifetime. It doesn't change. And it really is the roadmap for our bodies and for our health. And so what's really cool is when you learn your DNA, it's this foundational information that helps you show where you've got variations and where your genetic structure is normal. And there's been wonderful research on the genes that just helps us to study the place where we have variations and what that does. And so that's what allows us to know that, when I do my DNA, Lois has genetic variations related to vitamin B's and lactose. And so if you know where you've got your variations, that's where you want to you want to avoid, tripping or falling into that. So I call it the roadmap. If you know what your roadmap looks like, don't go driving into the potholes and, really thrashing your body by doing things that don't work with it. And so what we do at dnaPower is look at the genes that really impact your day-to-day health. So we look at, for example, there's no one size fits all diet. We look at your macronutrients, so your carbs, fats, proteins. It's different for everybody. Some people will think, oh, I'm going on a keto diet and do really, really well for a few months. But it turns out they don't have the fat genes, and they can create a fatty liver disease for themselves that actually we've seen some very, very sick people, even people we know as well, that's impacted. We'll then look at food sensitivities. I can tell you genetically if you've got issues with lactose and gluten. Sometimes those can be acquired over just through your gut health. We look at all the vitamins, and then we look at important underlying factors like inflammation, what type of inflammation genes you've inherited, your hormone genes, your detoxification. We look at even things that are really important related to it's, we think of it as Alzheimer's, but it's actually a plaquing gene that affects your cardiovascular or your brain. And it's food. There's so much that's food related. You can prevent all of that if you actually know your genes. So what we're trying to do is to take somebody's DNA with a very simple little cheek swab. That's all it is, just a little swab that goes in your cheek. You send it in, it goes into your customer portal, the results, and you learn kind of 70 areas of insight to your unique body. And with that information, you get a chance to meet with a nutritionist as well online, and we can help you say, here's kind of the 3 or 5 or 10 things that if you do differently will really help you live according to your body, so that you're working with your genetics, not against it. And so it's really exciting because we give people insight. We help in green and red, show you it's really simple. Where it's red is where you may have issues, and that's the areas to focus. You don't have to do everything right. You don't have to become a pure vegan. You just need to work according to what your body needs.
Yeah, I love that. And it is quite simple in the way it's described. And I have had a couple of people ask before, like, okay, well, if it's in my genetics, then it's set in stone. But I love how really what we're talking about with the red and that green, it's almost like a dimmer switch. Whereas if you have something that's too bright or too dark, so to speak, too green or green is good, too red, by changing the structure of how you eat, gives your cells the fuel to, when they go to replicate again based on the genetic program, because our cells replicate on average every year, when they come to replicate again, they will pick a better genetic program than a poor one, right? And so then you'll start replicating to move that dimmer switch back into the green.
Right.
Did you say that?
Yes. So that's the DNA doesn't change, but what changes is its expression. And that's where it's an on-off switch or a dimmer switch. And you're exactly right. But that's actually called epigenetics. And so the epigenetics is lifestyle. It's your diet, it's your vitamins, it's your exercise, it's sleep, stress, toxins in your body. And so what we're doing is all of your lifestyle impacts how your DNA program expresses itself. So if you've got a poor DNA program, but you're working and essentially your lifestyle is working to protect that, it doesn't need to express itself. It won't do something negative. If you're, really, let's say again, it's, for example, lactose, and you're just eating dairy, it can't metabolize or digest it. So you're going to get gut issues. You're maybe going to get acne. You're going to have hormonal imbalances, and you might not know what it's from because you're not allergic to it, but your body is reacting because it doesn't have the capability, and you've really set off some of these epigenetic factors that are now your body has to respond. So what's really cool about knowing DNA is when you know your DNA roadmap, it's actually the epigenetics, it's lifestyle, and what you do that makes the difference. And what's been perhaps one of the most fascinating parts of the research, because I love research, so I'm always researching and looking into things, is as I was researching DNA and epigenetics and lifestyle, what was remarkable to me is how much our mind and our spirit are really impact the expression of our DNA. And so there's studies that show you can, through your mind and intention alone, change the expression of your gene. So if you've got a malfunctioning gene, you can, through your mind and intentions and, again, positive emotion, work to change that. And so I love that it really showed, I mean, science is proving out how this mind, body, spirit connection is working, and we actually see it right through our DNA and the connection. Of course, the easiest way to support your DNA is just to eat according to your body. It takes a lot of, skill to be able to say, I'm going to turn my genes on and off. That takes a lot of practice for us to develop that capability, which we all have the capability to do.
Yes.
But it just takes a lot more effort. And so what's great is that we can eat according to DNA. And I know that's what you did when you learned some of your results as well, Ginette. I mean, that's been an important part for you in having to eat really, really clean, is you also have to manage your vitamin Bs in a very careful way. And so maybe you want to talk a little bit about some of how you manage your diet with some of that information.
Absolutely. And that was a critical shift for me, was understanding my diet, because again, as a kinesiologist, as a personal trainer in the fitness world, I was always inundated with the latest fads, keto, paleo, all these different things you should do for this kind of result. And I always found my body was really finicky, and I was always tired. And I was, of course, if people know my story, I was bleeding a lot every month too. And I could just never get back on track. And so if I speak first to, I want to speak to the hormones, but I also want to speak to food first. So food, one of the things that I learned in my DNA, which I wouldn't have known otherwise, is I'm actually very sensitive to fat. That the way in which I'm sensitive to fat is whatever fat I eat, I'm actually going to absorb 100% of it. So I only need a little bit of fat because I'm absorbing all of it. If I take in too much fat, I'm inundating my body, putting stress on my organs by having too much fat, right? So I actually have to eat way less fat than most people would think, which totally goes against keto diets, or even the Mediterranean diet is too much fat for me. And when I've tried that diet before, I had like gallbladder pain and all this kind of stuff. And so that was one key thing, is when I want to really decrease my inflammation in my body, I will take out a lot of fats. Not all fats, of course, I will keep in some good fats, but the amount is a lot smaller than I would have thought. Just as is, I realized the amount of protein that my body needed was way more than I thought, right? I thought higher fat, some protein, smaller carb, and it was actually a tiny amount of fat, lots of protein, and, an average amount of carbs, but clean carbs, and I also realized that I'm more sensitive to gluten. I already knew I couldn't have dairy. Like it laid out, like you said, this roadmap. And when I started following that roadmap, I was like, oh, well, that feels much better. And now, one of the best things I find about this, though, is because I was given that roadmap, it doesn't mean I have to eat perfect every day, right? I can go have fun on vacation. I can go, eat a whole bunch of chips or have that fatty meal. But I know I have a certain amount of leeway to do that. But then I know exactly how to come back to harmony. I know exactly what I need to do to clean it up. And within 2 days, I will feel a lot better. And so I wouldn't have known that without doing my DNA. So that was really big, as well as was knowing the supplements that I needed to take. Like you said, B supplements. And for me, it was even about 3-4 days after going on supplements like I did and knowing which ones specifically, I started feeling completely different. So the food as that fuel for our vehicle, when we know what it is specific to our design, is huge and changes things.
Yeah, there's a couple things in what you said there. One is when you actually know your roadmap, it's easier to stick to it. So the thing is, when you don't have it, you go, oh, I think it was this that made me, I don't feel great, but was it this or was it that? Like, you don't know. And so you give yourself permission to cheat a lot more, because you don't actually, I don't really know if it's, the dairy or what it is. So anyway, so what they've seen in the studies is that when you have the map, you stay to it much more. And there's great studies on keto versus a DNA diet. And over 18, in the first few months, the keto wins out in the first few months, but over 18 months, hands down, the DNA diet people are healthier. They stay to it. They keep the weight off. All of their biometric measurements are better. And that's because we're each unique. We know diets, some works for some, not for others. So that's all unique. So it's really important. So that's really, a wonderful thing there. So again, that's just a wonderful way to do it. And it helps give you recommendations, and yeah, that's great.
I want to speak to the hormone panel, because there's different tests that you can do when you do your DNA. And when I had a look at my hormones, that one was very eye-opening for me as well, because that really shifted the way that my body worked, and what really taught me that in my case, again, it's just my case, traditional medicine, the way that they normally offer it, I'll say, didn't apply to me. Now, if I just use my periods for an example, I would hemorrhage monthly. And so the natural, normal response of most doctors is, here's the birth control pill. Here's a synthetic estrogen progesterone blend or progesterone blend. Here you go. This will do it. What happened is that would make me bleed more. And the doctor's like, well, let's change the pill. So they changed the pill. I would bleed more. And it was just this compounding thing that they didn't know what to do with. And then when finally having my DNA done, I got to see how my progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone were actually interacting with each other. And the way in which they were was backwards to the most standard way. So giving me the pill would actually make me bleed way more. And I realized that helping to boost my testosterone, which is not something I would have thought of, right, actually helped to balance my estrogen and progesterone. And that actually was progesterone that was the biggest culprit, but I also don't, I don't release my estrogen. So it's this really interesting thing that seems so convoluted. But when it was laid out in my DNA, it was like, oh, I just need to do this. And that simple thing changed so much of my body's energy and my body's expression, and the decreased inflammation and all of this stuff. So for me, knowing what my hormones were doing and how to eat accordingly, when I put those two together, life became significantly different. I could actually put on some muscle, and some people might look at me and think, what are you talking about? But I I didn't have any ability to build muscle, to gain the fitness that I knew so well because of my background.
Mhm.
So it was to me, when people ask, what do you do for food? How do you know how to eat accordingly? It all comes down to DNA, knowing my DNA.
Yeah. And again, remembering that it's the roadmap. We can't tell you where you are today. That's what you know. And every other test that you do sort of is a snapshot at a point in time. This is kind of a lifetime foundational piece. So remember, it doesn't change. And, I would say when we work with people in the hormones, when we see their hormone panel very red, it's about biosynthesis, metabolism, and elimination of different the hormones. We can see if it's really red, it says that you don't do that function very well. And so for many women that, same with me, they put me on birth control. My body couldn't get rid of it. And in fact, it created a toxifying effect. And so, what you want to do with some of this, we'll recommend then you should go see a naturopath, do, a urine hormone test, that we don't do those things. What we're trying to do is just give you the data to show you where to look and where it's the highest likelihood that there may be some challenges or things that are occurring.
Yeah.
And so, again, those are wonderful things. Some of it's easier, like vitamins and that. I did want to talk a little bit about the quality of food and why vitamins are so important as well. And that's because our soils, we know, are depleted. We know there's so much genetically modified food. We don't even know in some cases whether it's been shifted or blended or merged to be able to create a more beautiful looking apple or carrot or whatever. But the nutrient value is sometimes under half what it used to be. And so we just don't get the same amount of nutrients. So I do really recommend for people that you do look to take vitamins, and just be aware that our food doesn't have quite the same quality and amount of nourishment in it that it should.
Absolutely. And I think too that this is a really great avenue for people to explore how their families eat, right? Like we had my children's DNA done and my husband, and it's neat to see where there's similarities, but also differences. And how one thing I realized is that, like a standard supper meal, right? A dinner meal, what my son needs to take in versus what my daughter needs to take in is actually different, right?
Yes.
My son is more similar to my husband and my daughter more similar to me. And so knowing that helps me make sure that they are getting the nutrients they need, and their supplements are different.
Yes.
Right. And I find knowing that as their children, gosh, I wish I would have known that when I was younger. I wish my parents had access to that when I was younger, because I think it would have, maybe provided some avenues that weren't so challenging growing up.
Yeah. Well, it was so fun. I was working with a family this week, and the kids are, 10 and I think 7. And it was just the young girl was really interested in her results and her brothers. And the mother said to me this week, it was just so wonderful. My daughter now went into the kitchen and made this healthier breakfast. And she sort of, her brother has Worth genes. She's encouraging him to eat a little bit healthier. So she was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this is actually getting through to them in some way as well. So it is a wonderful way to really look after the health of your family as also.
Beautiful. Well, anything that you would like to leave everybody with? Any kind of closing statements?
Well, what I want to do is, first of all, we love the whole mind, body, spirit connection. So if anybody's interested in doing this, you can use the promo code or the coupon code Avalon, and that'll give you $50 off the total power test. The tests are $4.99 Canadian, and so, but that includes a 45-minute consult with a nutritionist. You get actually a couple hundred pages worth of information, but it's you get a beautiful summary that with your graphs and your recommendations that you can print out just to have it on hand. So again, you're more than welcome to give it a try. If you have 23andMe or Ancestry data, it's $2.99 with $50 off. So it's a little bit cheaper. You don't get all of the information, but enough to be able to help provide some insight and some guidance. So, if you're interested in helping build that full, more holistic approach to your life, it's dnaPower.com. Recommend Total Power. Avalon as a coupon code. And, I would be an example of someone you spend your health trying to develop your wealth or who you are and what you are. And then you spend your wealth trying to get your health back. And I think we're in an era where health is so important. It comes through in the messages of spirit so much. This is a time about honoring Mother Earth, honoring our bodies, connecting into Earth. Today's, in some of your readings, you'll talk about grounding into Mother Earth, just such a critical time. And so the more that we can look after our own body, just like we look after Mother Earth, the more that we can look after our own planet, which is our body, the better off we'll be. It creates that clarity to support meditation and support some of the spiritual journey. And so I love that you have embodied that with what you do, and it's so fun to bring it all together. So delighted that we were able to talk about that and share that here. So thank you, Ginette.
Oh, you're so welcome. And I'm glad you mentioned that last piece about like creating more harmony for more ability to connect to the spirit, because it's very true. When our body is in a state of harmony, when it's not inflamed, when it's not fighting itself because of something, we have a greater ability to listen to our intuition. And where does our intuition show itself most? In the body. Our body talks to us. So when our body isn't busy doing other things connected to chaos of nutrients, it has space and availability to communicate the energies that are coming in. So a healthy body makes for greater intuition and connection. So I love that you mentioned that. Beautiful way to wrap it up. I definitely encourage all of you guys listening and watching to really consider this. If you've been searching for something, if your body's not feeling right, this radically changed my whole outlook and how I eat and do things. It really has. It's something I've been doing for years now with ease. It's not hard to do. And now it is just second nature for me. So thank you all so much for the question. Those that asked the questions, I'm so grateful that we got to have this conversation. And Lois, thank you so much for joining.
Great. Thank you so much, Ginette.
All right, everyone. Have a beautiful week, and we'll see you next week.